this summed it up for me from Shane Beamer's perspective after the game from the Carolina offensive production.
What are your main concerns about on the offense?
Well,
Spurrier-esque, isn't it? He didn't quite get the P on the well. It wasn't a welp. It was pretty dang close. And just that nonverbal. Is it verbal if you make the sound effect? It's just it's got to be a word to be verbal, doesn't it? That physical reaction of just, oh gosh, man. Well, I mean, Spurrier would have been so ticked off. You guys remember when South Carolina beat North Carolina in the opener? That was who was the starting quarterback? That was the Connor Mitch game, right? Where he started his first game, and it was dang near his last one. Offense was pretty brutal. And the punter was the big story. Spurrier, never forget him going in, or he's coming out, right? So he'd already done his press conference. He was clearly, not pleased, happy to get a win, relatively satisfied to get a win against North Carolina, but I think he knew there. This was the first game of that last season, right, in 2015. Yep. Had to go brag on my punter, as he was saying, because I think it was weirdly set up there in Bank of America, and maybe it's just because they don't let the opposing coaches go where the NFL guys, I don't know, but he was coming back by through the media workroom, I think, after he left the press conference or something like that. I just remember it was kind of unofficial, but it was just the deflation and the kind of like the disgust of his own offense, having to brag about a punter in a post-game press conference. Shane Beamer's not Steve Spurrier. He was plenty pleased to talk about, and should have been, a couple of punt blocks for touchdowns, how he'd never even been a part of that in all the years of being around great special teams. But there is plenty to be concerned about from the Carolina offensive perspective. Let's put those numbers out. This is not a made-up boogeyman, right? This is black and white. Hey, here are the numbers. Let's look at them. Team stats. Total yards on offense, 311 for Georgia State, 306 for South Carolina. Exact number of offensive plays, 69 for each team. 2.5 average per rush for South Carolina, double that for Georgia State at 5 yards per rush. These are massively concerning numbers. And I can't tell you before the game that Carolina's got to run the football against Georgia State, or they're not going to have a chance to run it against Arkansas or Georgia, and then come out of that thing and say, well, maybe this or that, and there was some miscommunication, and that was the first game, and it's going to be okay. I can't tell you that, man. I can tell you that there is still a chance it improves. And hearing Shane Beamer say teams improve most from game 1 to game number 2, there's a possibility, and maybe it can be a situation where Spencer Rattler was confused or unclear, did not know exactly what he needed to do when certain looks were presented to him. And that's why you saw what you saw. But that sounds a little bit too pie in the sky to me. That sounds way too oversimplified. I'm sure Spencer Rattler can be better, and there are things, and hearing Shane Beamer say after the game that now they have a better understanding of everything they put into this game from an offensive game plan perspective and how they need to narrow that down to refine that now moving forward to be more effective on offense. Yes, absolutely. Makes sense. But they also knew that going into the game. I mean, they hadn't seen it in an actual game, but they'd seen practice. And I'm sure they tried to simulate all of this in, what do they call them? They didn't call them, don't call it a scrimmage, a preseason scrimmage, right? A preseason game, I think is what they called it, those scrimmages. Well, you're responsible as the coaching staff to have a really good idea of that going in. And you don't get a pass and you don't get a do-over. But you're not limited to looking like that the rest of the season either. And how much credit do you give Georgia State? I think for those of us who follow college football, you give them 25% of the credit maybe. I think that's fair. 25% of the credit goes to a Georgia State defense that has been pretty good in the Sun Belt. And then you got to give 75% of the responsibility for not looking good on offense to the Gamecock offense. Offensive coordinator being number one, bearing the responsibility. I don't see how you can look at that thing any differently.